Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to the Town Hall on Shaping the Future of Peer Support through Public and Private Partnerships, reprising a table conversation that we had at the URU National Conference in January. I'm Steve Dandino, Executive Director of URU and Associate Provost at Colorado State University. If I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, we're delighted you're taking time today to join this town hall. There should be plenty of time for interaction with our distinguished panel. We're looking forward to that. This is a town hall that's recorded, and we will clean up the captioning and post it at the URU website for everyone's benefit, especially those, of course, who can't be here with us today. Knack has been a partner of URU for many years now. We're really excited about the work that they do in facilitating tutoring, which has enormous implications for each of our campuses, for those with whom they work directly and those who might be interested in working with them. And we have a lot of conversations ongoing about ways that we might expand on and leverage that experience and expertise that Knack has developed over its initial 10 years of existence. So we're grateful to Paige Keller of Knack, who is going to moderate today's session, and our distinguished colleagues from URU institutions who are going to join her in conversation. Let me turn things over then to Paige Keller. Welcome, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it. Hopefully you can all see my screen right now and hear me well. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much to Yuru and Steve and his team for the invitation to be a part of today's town hall. And we look forward to an engaging conversation about the role of public-private partnerships and how they can play in shaping the future of peer support. Our goal today is hopefully to keep this session interactive and grounded in real campus experiences. And while we will have time for Q&A at the end, please don't hesitate to jump in with questions or thoughts as we go. You can use the hand raise feature if you want to speak up. You can drop questions in the chat if you would prefer to do it that way. But this truly is meant to be a dialogue, not just a presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me cover the agenda quickly. We'll start by taking a look at how student support has evolved over the years, what's changed, where things might be headed. Then we'll talk about how public-private partnerships exist on campuses and what maybe is driving those efforts. From there, we'll talk more specifically about Knack partnerships as a way to scale support in a sustainable way. I'll give you a quick overview of Knack. We can't leave here without me doing that. And then finally, we'll open things up for discussion and questions. But again, feel free throughout. We're all educators here, so feel free throughout to ask questions, again, using the hand raising feature, or just drop a question in the chat or a comment. Let's get started with some introductions. I will start and then pass it along to my colleagues. My name is Paige Keller, and I am the Vice President of Academic Relations at Knack, where we partner directly with colleges and universities to make peer learning more accessible and equitable. I spent nearly 3 decades working in higher ed before joining the team at Knack. I worked specifically in learning assistance and peer education programs, and I remain passionate about helping institutions expand what's possible when it comes to supporting students. I'm joined today by 3 folks I really admire: Stephen Girardot, Keith Renshaw, and Marie VanDerZanden, who will each share their own campus perspectives throughout our time together. So I am going to pause and hand it off to Stephen to introduce himself.
Hey, thank you so much, Paige, and good afternoon, I guess, for those on the East Coast, or good morning for those over on the West Coast. I'm Stephen Girardot. I'm the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education at Georgia Tech, and in one of my earlier iterations in my professional experience, I've also run academic success, including tutoring programs and other academic support programs. So I'm really pleased to bring that to the conversation today. At Georgia Tech, most of you know, we're a very STEM-heavy institution, so a lot of our academic support, like probably most universities, focuses on introductory STEM courses. And we've been partnering with Knack now. I think we're in our 3rd year, right, Paige? We started with a pilot And that has just really quickly proliferated into a very successful integration of Knack within our academic support portfolio. So look forward to the conversation today and talking about our experiences at Georgia Tech.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And we'll go in alphabetical order. How about you, Keith?
Sure. Good afternoon / good morning. As Stephen said, everybody, I'm glad y'all could join. My name is Keith Renshaw. I'm the Senior Associate Provost for Undergraduate Education here at George Mason. We're a large public research university in Virginia, serve about 29,000 undergraduate students. We have a wide range of programs, but to Stephen's point, certainly a lot of our supports are in more STEM focused courses. We do have a very robust writing and communication center, and we've made the decision not to sort of enter those kind of classes into Knack. So happy to talk about that and related decisions as we go. But we're just in our second semester of our partnership with Knack, so I'm happy to share some of the experiences we've had in sort of getting this off the ground and some of the considerations for us.
Thank you so much, Keith and Anne-Marie.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Marie VanDerZanden. I'm the Associate Provost for Academic Programs here at Iowa State University. Similar to Georgia Tech and George Mason, we are a large R1 institution. We are STEM heavy, and a majority of our courses that we've used in the Knack program are related to our introductory STEM courses. We're just starting our second semester as well. We launched last fall. I'm happy to talk about how that went and some of the things that we're dealing with and trying to address now as we move into our second semester, some of our lessons learned. It's interesting at Iowa State, the tutoring and our academic success center is managed out of our Division of Student Affairs, not in our Division of Academic Affairs. So this gives me an opportunity to work with my colleagues in Student Affairs as we look at launching Knack and then continuing to use it as a product to help our students. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks so much, Anne-Marie. We are just so grateful that you all agreed to join us today to share your experiences on your respective campuses. But let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's talk a bit about how student support has changed over time. Most of us, I think all of us, have seen a pretty significant shift in how students seek and use support and in how we deliver it. So I want all of us in the room, not just our panelists, but I want all of us in the room to think about your answers to these three questions. What did support look like at your institution 5 or 10 years ago? And what's different now and why? And when you think about what's ahead, what does the future of student support look like? Not just on your campus, but really across the country. And so I'd love to hear from our partners, Anne-Marie, Keith, and Stephen, whoever wants to jump in first.
Sure, I can go ahead and kick us off. So I think, like a lot of people right there, when you talk about 5 years, right, then you start getting into 5 years ago. Now we're just all like, maybe it's an extended spring break. I mean, clearly things have changed in that time frame. I think really broadly, what you've seen is an increased need, I think, for students, both in terms of some of your basic, certainly math, has become a thing, both in terms of the fields that a lot of students are tending to pursue, and in terms of the level of preparation they seem to have when they get in. But you're also seeing, at least at our campus, a lot of increase in needs of some of your basic sort of studenting skills, study skills, time management, note taking, et cetera, et cetera. So there's one component. A second component that I think is really important to sort of recognize is the evolution of technology in meeting, not just in meeting students' needs and not just in being able to sort of increase accessibility, but also in student expectations. Students, this is the way that they are navigating the world. And I think we've had a lot of conversations on campus about whether or not that's a good or bad thing, but regardless of that, it is a thing. And so we need to be able to adapt to that and work with that, to be thinking about how we make the best use of these types of sort of, evolving technologies. We have a number of new sort of systems coming in play on campus. There's a constant need to sort of iterate and evolve and keep up with, new systems. And I think that's I don't see any drawdown to that in the near future. And of course, now, everybody's figuring out, well, how does AI gonna factor into everything? And so that's going to be another key consideration. And I think it's going to be another sort of example of something where we have to think about how can we best position ourselves to use this to the best benefit of our students, and not to the detriment of our students, right? But burying our heads in the sand certainly isn't going to get us anywhere. So I think that certainly the scope of needs that they tend to have on the academic preparation side has certainly changed over the last handful of years, and their expectations about how they're going to get those needs and the delivery, as well as our ability to deliver it in a number of different modalities, are some of the key changes I've seen.
Yeah, Keith, I want to comment on one of the things that you brought up, and it's something that I'm sure none of us have heard about often, even today. The joke, AI. We, we're constantly bombarded with articles and research on the use of AI and how students are leaning on AI. Do you think that there is a greater role for using AI in student support services? And I guess my next question is there any future where you see that it will be entirely AI without the human interaction component? Any of you can respond to that.
I think that there certainly is a role for AI in some form of the student support. I don't know what that would look like necessarily. I do think that using AI on the front end from a triaging standpoint, using it as a chat bot, if you will, to help students get connected to the right resource. I like what Keith mentioned about the types of support that students need. And that certainly is what we're seeing here at Iowa State, is students will come to us with a request for tutoring, but what they really need is something related to study skills or time management or something like that. And quite honestly, our team, we don't care how we get them in the door. We just want them to come, be it virtually or in person. And then we use that human interaction to get them connected with that right set of skills. We do a lot of interventions and outreach during this semester that we have intentionally used the human interaction in the texting piece of it. And the students are kind of funny when they realize it really is Stephanie on the other end of that text message, that it's not just a chat bot or something like that. And at our institution, where we've got about about a third to 40% of our students are first generation, and aren't necessarily sure how to navigate the landscape of college just in general, and having a large student body, it can be overwhelming, but having that personal connection really is important. Either getting them connected with mental health services or the financial aid office or the whole suite of offerings that we have from our Academic Success Center. So I think there's a role. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and.
I certainly don't think it's an either or, just, curious to know if everyone is on the same page, for sure. The human interaction piece is so important, and we'll continue talking about that as we eventually move into the Knack conversation later within the hour. Stephen.
Yeah, to the slide here, I mean, I think I might start with the third bullet first, which is, and picks up on a blog, I think, that you all posted page recently, which is, I think the model is really changing to a model where we set up a learning center or academic support center and expect students to come to us versus how do we set up programs and initiatives and we bring them to where students are and meet them where they are. And I really think that's a conversation that I've been trying to have with my team across many different academic services. How do we meet students where they are, not set up workshops and things and then want them all to come to us? Yes, there's still value in having them come to us, but how do we better meet students where they are, both, you know, in their journey academically, but also physically where they are, in their dorms, in their apartments, in their co-op jobs, or wherever they need that support and help. So with our tutoring program, I'll say, coming back to the first question, you know, for a long time, we had the very traditional tutoring center, one-on-one tutoring program. We set it up in our office, generally 9 to 5 when our staff wanted to be there, a lot of administrative support, hiring tutors, all the student hiring functions. I mean, I don't know about most campuses out there, but we have not nailed our HR functions at Georgia Tech to be perfectly seamless. So a lot of administrative time spent hiring and paying students and timesheets and all of that sort of thing. And, you know, we're limited also by by the physical piece, having it on campus in our center when we could be there and then we needed our tutors to be there. So there was a lot of constraints around that. And I was anxiously really thinking about, how do we move into more of an online platform, and not necessarily that all tutoring needed to be online, but how could we take advantage of what Uber and Lyft did for taxis and transportation? How could we bring a similar idea to the concept of tutoring? Meaning that when you need help, you don't want to have to go schedule an appointment and then maybe get an appointment in 2 or 3 days later. A student needs help when they need help. And for all the best advice we give them, don't wait till the last minute and study in advance. We know, especially early undergraduates are not going to all come in with the best study skills and the best time management skills from day one. So we have to sort of be ready to, like I said, meet them where they are. And so when Knack came along and started having conversations with them, I mean, one of the things that I really liked was, and I'm a very big advocate of the peer-to-peer approach. And one of the things that I really liked and wanted to retain in anything that we did as we pivoted was retaining our own students serving as the tutors and academic support leaders. And so that's been, I know I'm jumping a little bit into the Knack piece, but just to give you a sense of kind of what our priorities were and how we provide that support. Again, my academic background is chemistry. I've spent a lot of time teaching, love teaching first year chemistry and sort of introducing students both to the content, but also to the college environment. So I love teaching fall semester, Gen Chem 101, or whatever it's called on your campus, for those reasons. And I know that, as bright as the students are we bring in at Georgia Tech, they're going to need that support as they ramp up to the learning environment. So, the model that we've developed has allowed us also, as I said, to sort of reduce some of the administrative structure that we have and use those resources to support some of our other academic support portfolio. So I'm a big believer in peer instructional models such as supplemental instruction, learning assistance. If you're familiar with PLTL, which is very much rooted in the sciences like chemistry, there's some really, really exciting and powerful models of academic support that I also wanted to put on the priority list while we continue to offer a one-to-one tutoring program. So this has just allowed us to also better leverage our resources, meet the needs of students that want the one-to-one and individual tutoring form of academic support, while also being able to prioritize course-based peer learning instructional models such as those that I described. And so in terms of the student needs, we want to be able to offer a very diverse portfolio of academic support programs that meet students in different contexts. And I think a very key point when you move into programs like SI is you're making the point that, it's not the student that has the deficiency. It's just that the course is a really challenging course and everybody's going to need help in this kind of course. And so, again, we wanted to have something for everybody. And this partnership has allowed us to sort of continue offering a very robust one-to-one tutoring program that meets students where they are and when they need the help, not when we say they can have the help, and put some of these additional resources into more scalable forms of academic support that we continue to invest in concurrently with one-to-one tutoring.
Thank you, Stephen. And as I transition to the next slide, I want to comment on, or I want to comment on something you were talking about, and you were saying that there is a lot of value to traditional services, and I 100% agree with that. That's my background, are traditional services. And I believe there is value in maintaining a lot of what has been offered through the years. But when you think about the history and the evolution of higher ed, think about 300 years ago, those learning centers didn't exist. That's a construct of the late 20th century, really. And so to expect learning centers and other support centers on campus to not change is unrealistic. To expect that the services we provide shouldn't change because for the past 30 years, these things have been, going beautifully and students use the services we have now. It's unrealistic to think that we shouldn't change or that we can't change. And so I think it's important to consider what you were saying, that, students, they come to us right now knowing that if they want, you mentioned Uber and Grubhub and all of those things, if they want food, they don't have to go to the place to pick it up. It can come to them. They don't have to go hail a taxi cab. They can have an Uber come to them. So I think it is it is a value to all of us to consider, again, the history and the evolution of higher ed, and the fact we're living, last week was the past, right? We're living the future right now. So the second set of questions I have here are more related to just public-private partnerships in general on your campus. Privatization, it can go, we could talk about areas like auxiliary services like the dining hall or parking services. Those are public-private partnerships, right? Residence halls are sometimes run by privatized companies. But I want to talk specifically about different areas of student support that your campus uses through a private company or has considered. Could be counseling, it could be mentoring, it could be a chatbot. What challenges and priorities have shaped your approach to student support, and where have partnerships played a role in helping you move forward? Any of you?
I'm happy to start with a few examples from Iowa State. I think, we've got a number of the private and public partnerships, like I'm sure a lot of institutions do. Although when I think about the ones that have really been most effective, when we're making a decision on doing something related to student success, we're really trying to find a way to bring in a product or an organization that complements our existing infrastructure, and something that maybe we don't have the full set of resources to do locally on our own, but how can we bring it in and have it as a value add, for example, to the other things we're doing. One area is around student health and student wellness. We've partnered with another organization to provide the 24-hour counseling service that's available to students. That has relieved some of the responsibility or the pressure on our local facilities. And it also helps students get access to the support they need when they need it. And then if it's an issue that is more complicated or needs some continued support for the student, then we can refer them into our counseling center here on campus and get that one-on-one support that is really grounded with our staff. So that's worked out, I think, fairly well. I think another example related to the student support has been our relationship and our partnership with EAB Navigate. So we've started using that platform in its earlier stages about 7 or 8 years ago, and it really has evolved over time. And I have to say that this, as well as with Knack, at least at Iowa State, it's a pretty significant culture change. when we're asking our advisors in this case to be using a different methodology of interacting with their students, using a tool that can help them be more effective and more efficient with their time, but also feel like they're still able to do that one-on-one personalized support for the student. I think sometimes some of our team members feel that the technology kind of gets in the way. So helping them see how they can use it to streamline their work and then really spend their time with the student when it comes to, something a little more nuanced, like career advising or, making decisions on internships and some of that. Whereas how do we take a look at your class schedule for next fall? Well, have you taken this class yet? Okay, then you should take the next class. Those types of things can be automated a little bit more. But we've found good luck with the Navigate platform in that it has met a need that we don't have on campus, or that wasn't being able to be met with on campus anywhere else. I will say, so aside from the culture change sometimes, the other challenge, quite honestly, is related to the technologies that already exist on a campus and getting them to integrate in a way and work together so they can pull the data out of Workday Student into Navigate, or the coordination with Canvas is another example. It sounds great on the surface, but that doesn't always happen easily or very quickly. And when one product changes, then the impact on the other product, you can imagine that ripple effect. So that creates a different set of issues that need to be addressed. But those are just a few examples of how and why we've used these partnerships on our campus.
That's really helpful. And thank you for bringing up EAB Navigate as an example, because getting faculty and staff and administrators to use a new platform is almost harder than getting students to. But either way, the culture shift is necessary and it takes some time. Stephen or Keith?
Sure.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. we're battling each other to not unmute and then mute or unmute. Yeah, I'll just quickly add. I agree, but everything I think Anne Marie laid out, I think she captured. I think for us, when we're sort of making decisions like this, right, is there's probably more than this, right? But in my head, I think about three sort of main factors. One is, do we have a need that exceeds our capacity, right, to deliver? And that's certainly a time to think about a public-private partnership. And sometimes that capacity is about, initial investment, right? So this happens a lot in sort of, capital projects right around campus, that kind of thing. And it can be other pieces as well. A second thing is whether or not it sort of exceeds our need for the infrastructure we need to sustain it. And so, Stephen mentioned, right, all the sort of hiring, the paperwork, the timesheets, right, there's a tipping point sometimes where it's like, it's just not worth it for us to invest in the full-time employees and staffing it will take to process all these things. If there's another solution that exists that can do it at scale that, that we think, sort of is, meets our kind of quality, right, sort of demands and everything. And so I think that's the second piece. And then the third is sometimes the variability, right? Sometimes you've got work that spikes at various times and there's not obvious work that would fill in at other times. And so you have to make the decision about whether or not you're going to invest in staffing on your own, right, to sort of maintain that, or if it pays off to sort of, again, right, find a good partner. Obviously, all that is, right, subject to finding, somebody whose quality you are comfortable with, right, and everything else. But I've seen this come up in a number of different instances. Timely care. We use timely care to supplement our counseling and psychological services, right? That's one where it's like it's at scale. It's more flexible. They're able to sort of meet the demand, and so we don't have the capacity to kind of staff ourselves up here to do that, nor do we have the space and infrastructure to support it. And so we made that decision. I've seen this also with IT. We're also doing a lot of partnering. And I was actually in a meeting recently with IT folks who were saying, to some degree, we were talking about expanding a system that we had built on our own, a handful of years ago. And it was IT's strong preference to find a partner because they said that the the time and investment it takes for the upkeep of these over time and the customization to, the changing needs is just not worth it compared to a kind of an out of the box solution for them. And so that was kind of an interesting perspective for me, because I just always assumed it was a sheer capacity issue, but it really wasn't. It was much more about where are we going to invest the people we have, and then does it make sense to to do this. So I think those are some of the considerations that come into play for us.
Keith, I'm really happy to hear that you all are using timely care at a time when so many students are finally recognizing the need for support, personal, emotional support through counseling or therapy. I have been in conversations with people across the country about their counseling center budgets are being slashed. So I'm thrilled that you all have timely care to be able to support your students in that way. Stephen.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add to this discussion. I mean, in terms of public-private partnerships, we, like the others, are also using EAB as a platform. And as I mean, obviously throughout a place like Georgia Tech, public-private partnerships are very much a part of the ecosystem here in all sorts of areas: innovation, economic development, community partnerships, and so forth like that. In the student success domain, I would say one area in particular is in the career space. We don't have a specific platform. We've been in discussion with some platforms that we may potentially think about, but we certainly partner with corporations and industry to connect our students to those experiences through internship, co-ops, shadowing programs, and other ways that we. Paige, I see a cat in there, the tail wagging in your screen, a dog. Cute.
Yes. And he just came in soaking wet, so I don't know.
Sorry to digress, but the days of Zoom, right? When people's kids, interrupt the calls and all that stuff. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, in the career space is a particular area that I've been, in addition to sort of the work with Knack and academic support services, but really thinking about how we can be more intentional about the partnership around career development. The other space that we are also involved in a partnership is around mentoring. And so we do partner with Mentor Collective on a mentoring platform, both for, we have a first gen platform and a transfer student platform. So at Georgia Tech, we sort of operate a lot with our first year students in mind, but we have a very significant transfer population. About 20% of our graduates do start at Georgia Tech as a transfer student. And so it's a group that we've been really thinking more intentionally about how we support, their onboarding and transition into the university, as well as ensuring their overall success. And we do know that they do succeed at comparable rates as our native first-year students, but that startup piece can be a little bumpy sometimes when they're coming in midstream to a university like Georgia Tech. So Mentor Collective has been another partnership in the mentoring space that we've been really pleased with. And in a similar way, not different things, but in some ways to Knack, is some of that administrative work gets taken by the platform. It's still our students connecting with our students. Both are very similar in that spirit, but some of the back end work, and also just to plug for the analytics and data that Knack provides. Mentor Collective, I mean, all that work on, the data that you want and in your leadership roles that you ask your directors to provide, that you people above us, your provosts and presidents want to see, is this actually working? What are the outcomes? What are the effectiveness of this? I mean, that's just a piece of all of this that's really powerful in terms of not just measuring numbers of people, which is important. You want people using it, but what is the impact it's having? What are the outcomes of these initiatives in terms of whatever metrics you're looking at: student success, retention, graduation, engagement, belonging, et cetera, et cetera. How can we link these initiatives to those types of outcomes? So those are two of the things that we are really, I would say, in the student success domain. And then that third area, career, is one that we're thinking a little bit more intentionally about.
Stephen, thank you so much. And I think that that's a really good segue into our next set of questions. I want to bring the conversation for the second, just less than half of our conversation, into a more applied space. When institutions partner with Knack, it's often because they're trying to maybe reach more students, especially those who are not using existing support. maybe the institutions want to expand coverage without overloading internal teams, or they just want to make academic support more flexible and accessible and equitable. So Stephen, Keith, and Anne Marie, I'd love for each of you to share a little bit about what led you to your partnership with Knack, how the implementation process went, and what outcomes you're seeing now. What I'm going to do is I have slides for each of the partnerships, just some high-level data, some metrics we wanted to share with the audience. And so I'm going to, there he is again, Stephen. Now he's dirtying up my white chair. Now I'm going to move into the first slide. Stephen, I believe it's Georgia Tech up first. So get ready. Think about, again, what led you to the partnership, what what were some of the challenges, what have been the positives about the entire experience, and some of the metrics that you've seen. So I'll hand it over to you, Stephen.
Yeah, and I won't go like into all the details of the data on this slide, but sort of, what led us to the partnership. I touched on that a little bit in my opening comments, but I'll add some additional context. So, we're all thinking 5 years ago, COVID and the abrupt transition to online and digital learning and remote learning and all the terms that most of us had never heard. I'd never used Teams, frankly, before COVID. So I've used Zoom or, sort of a little bit, but it really accelerated the need to figure out how we could provide academic support services more robustly in online settings. So it was already something, as I said, I've been thinking about as a director of a center, constantly asking, what can we be doing in this technology space? Where do we really need to go, and how do we be more forthright in thinking about how to provide and scale services using technology, going online, meeting students where they're at, and really hadn't made a lot of headway. Some of the platforms out there that were coming on board, were more just, you connect a student with a tutor that could be anywhere in the world. You don't really know who the tutors are. And just a lot of sort of, wonders and concerns, I would say, in terms of the effectiveness and certainly academic integrity is something that our faculty and we all care deeply about. So not knowing sort of the ins and outs of who would be that. So concurrently, as we were sort of, moving through the pandemic and figuring that out, started to have conversations with Knack. And as I said, one of the key things that really immediately connected me with Knack was the fact that we are still using our own students as the tutors. And that was a really fundamental. Now, I know there are some ways I think there's some variations if you can. You don't have to do it. You're not limited only to that, I should say. Paige can expand on that. But for us at Georgia Tech, I'm a real, really, as I said, the peer-to-peer learning model is fundamental. And so as you look at the investment too in the platform, the first thing that you realize is a lot of that investment is going straight back to your own students' pockets. A lot of the administrative work that you were doing internally is now going to be shifted to Knack, which has some pros and cons as well, but overall more benefits than not benefits, I would say. And so when we started with Knack, I said, okay, let's just limit it to College of Engineering classes, upper level classes, because that's where we struggle to find tutors for. So, when you need a tutor like a junior level class, you're looking for maybe seniors or other juniors who have already taken the class. And at that time, they're in internships, they're co-ops, they're 1 foot out the door graduating. So finding tutors to maybe tutor some of those, upper level, even sophomore level, junior level engineering courses has always been a struggle for us. And yet we've wanted to provide support kind of beyond the introductory gateway STEM courses. So we started with that idea, like, let's pilot it with those courses in mind, with our College of Engineering, and see if we can make, inroads in providing more academic support specifically for some of the core classes in engineering. Within the first month, I had one of the academic leaders in the College of Sciences saying, why aren't you doing this for us too? So we quickly realized that it just made a lot of sense to just kind of jump right in and offer this for all of the courses, with some exceptions. Like Keith mentioned, we don't do it for the writing and communication courses at Tech either. We have a writing center that is set up successfully to work with those students. I'm not saying we wouldn't, but for now they have their own piece, and we don't necessarily do that on Knack. But it's also invited us into providing support for places where we traditionally had not provided tutoring beyond engineering. So language classes, for example, getting more support for some of those classes. As we have grown into the partnership, I mean, the statistics here just keep growing and growing. And I was really pleased to see a couple, like I think back in February, January, we were in the top 5 schools of Knack users. And at first I thought, well, is that a good thing or not a good thing? But in reality, it's a very good thing because our students are using the platform. And that's what we want. We want to normalize seeking academic support and assistance when they need it. And so seeing our student response to the platform, and yes, being in the top 5 was a point of pride that we embrace that at Georgia Tech. We want our students seeking academic support and help. And you can see the numbers there, and they're just growing. I mean, we get another one of the emails that say, now you've reached 20,000 appointments. Now you've and on and on and on. In fact, we've also, my counterpart in graduate education has been piloting it this year for graduate students, because we do have graduate students that come in and they need academic support, maybe in some fundamental areas. So we're trying that out in the graduate space to see how the response is there. But yeah, the success has really grown. And like I said, we went from a pilot initially and sort of constraining it to now we really just are kind of all in. And we've also we've completely replaced our on-campus one-to-one tutoring program. So our individual one-on-one program is Knack. And as I said, we've shifted some of the in-person, other resources we've had now are shifted into other types of academic support that we're offering through our Academic Success Center.
Yeah, just a few things I wanted to point out and maybe to get you to confirm. One, no one lost a job in the academic success center at Georgia Tech, correct? No one lost a job when they brought Knack to campus, correct? Okay, I just wanted to.
And that's a great point, Paige. I do want to say that some of the resistance comes from the academic support staff. And we've talked about this in other panels and presentations, but there is a bit of a change resistance, job protection resistance. The quality can only be good if we are the ones doing the training and all of these other things. And so, I know Paige comes from a learning support background. I've had that background. I get that. So some of that, but we are not in a position where we have so many staff that we don't have things for them to do in the world of academic success. We have plenty of other opportunities. And so shifting some of those priorities to, like I said, some of these other programs has been a game changer in some ways for us.
Yeah, and instead of those professionals in learning support pushing paperwork and doing the bureaucratic work of hiring and managing timesheets and all of that, they're actually able to do the good work of helping their students. And that's something that I've heard from a lot of our partners who say, I'm just really glad that I'm not bogged down in the paperwork anymore. And we're happy to do it. Something else I just wanted to mention before handing it over to, and I'm going to go ahead and slide to the next slide so we can, it's going to be Anne Marie. Before handing it over to Anne Marie, is that yes, we also did partner with the grad school where, all students, all courses, undergrad and grad at Georgia Tech. And what I love about it at any of our partnerships where we're all students, all courses, is that we're reaching students. You might have one student in an upper level class who needs help and needs this course to graduate. We want to help that student as much as we want to help the many students in organic chemistry who need help, right? So when I say things like, we reach corners of the catalog that traditional centers often cannot, that's what I mean. So in philosophy, in an upper level chemistry class, whatever, we want to ensure that all students are getting the support they need.
And I want to just put one more quick thing, Paige, too, before, and as I treat Knack as an extension of our programming at Georgia Tech, as an extension of our center. It's not I think you could if you wanted to, but it's an extension of our center. It is not a standalone third-party provider, and we just kind of hope for the best. And as Paige and her colleagues know, we're very hands-on and involved in how we would like it to see Knack integrated and implemented within our structure at Georgia Tech. And so they've been great partners with us. It doesn't mean we get everything we want, But we've been great partners in the philosophy that, no, this is not just a third party. And we say, go over and do Knack and we hope it works out. No. It's our students, it's our branding, it's our funding. We're going to treat it as an extension, as a core part of our services, not a third party add-on.
Yeah, and that's exactly the way we see it too. We see ourselves as an extension, and we're a partner to help empower you and your team and all the students on campus. Now, Anne Marie, I want to hand it over to you next. We have about 15 minutes left, so I do want to make sure we're able to talk about Iowa State and George Mason. We did have a question in the chat from Candace about the in-person tutoring options as well. So if you can both, when we get to both of you, talk about the options for your students to be tutored in person or online.
Certainly. So I'm really happy to see this slide and the data that Knack was able to provide. You know, very similar to some of the things Stephen has said. We look at Knack as one of many tools that we have available to our students. Majority of our sessions are online, but and you can see almost 90% of them. But we do have on-campus in-person sessions as well in our library, which is centrally located. And for some students who maybe are not quite sure about what the tutoring is, they want to be in person initially. And then I think we find after that, their follow-up sessions are online and they understand more how things work. So we're doing a little bit of both, but making this available, which is the fourth bullet, about 24% of the sessions occurring outside of the 9 to 5 timeframe. That was the other reason we decided to engage with Knack, is we knew that students were needing these supports at times outside of our regular hours on campus. And so really pleased to see that students are using that. I think that will just continue to grow as they learn more about it. As I said before, when we launched this last fall, this was at the same time we were in the middle of our first use of Workday Student as well. So we were a little slow on the rollout and the implementation because of all the technical integrations that needed to happen. So I would anticipate next year when we look at these numbers, they'll be even higher because students will have had the full 16 weeks really to engage with that. The other thing that I think is important in looking at our numbers is we had 3,600 students sessions that were completed, but that was really focused around about 20 or so courses. So we had a curated list that we started with. We didn't do just a pilot in a college per se, but our pilot was more our highest requested tutoring courses. So it included a number of our intro math courses, biology courses, physics, chemistry, the typical ones that you might anticipate. So that's where we started from the courses that we're offering. The other thing I would say is, students are using it, which is great. We know that will continue to increase. The other big cultural change at Iowa State is before we leveraged Knack, students were required to pay a nominal fee for a tutoring session. There's some interesting history around that. It was fairly effective, but when we launched this, we made the tutoring free now to students. Now, I want to make sure, though, it isn't free. It still has to be paid for one way or another. And so we're still trying to figure out how we're going to continue to manage that internally. But I will say that the positive feedback that has gotten from our parents' Facebook page, when the parents get online and they're talking to each other about this free tutoring for their students at Iowa State, that has had some really good positive outcomes that aren't tangible necessarily in a student success rate, but it certainly reflects well for the institution. So those are just kind of a few things and our reasons for getting engaged with Knack.
Yeah, we want to make sure, I think your old model worked really well at Iowa State, but this new model creates that equity piece that didn't exist before, right? We want all students, regardless of what's in their bank accounts, to be able to to access tutoring. Okay, on to Keith, and we only have 10 minutes left, so please, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. Keith is going to share about our partnership with George Mason, and then I'm going to give a very quick overview of what Knack is.
Yeah, and I'll go pretty quickly because I think Stephen and Anne-Marie have hit a lot of really key points. We just started in the fall. Like Anne-Marie, we have a curated list of courses. It is with enrollment up to 10,000 students, like across the semester. So it's pretty big chunk of classes, and we just used our sort of DFW rates crossed with who agreed, right? Because there were a lot of largely people were all on board, but there are a couple of places where like, well, I don't know. We have not replaced anything. So even if a class that had existing tutoring on campus, we have a math tutoring center, for instance, that is still running while we have about 5 or 6 different math courses in the tutoring piece. We have an econ tutoring sort of center. It's too strong a word, but it's available, but you can also get tutoring in our sort of 2 biggest econ classes through Knack. So we are very eager to be able to compare outcomes. We want to compare usage, right? We want to see, are we getting higher usage overall? Are we getting different students using different, right, sort of services? And then we're seeing different outcomes, right, based on whether or not you use Knack versus or in-person stuff. Where we can, there are going to be some places where we can, and quite frankly, some places where even though we have availability both in-house and through Knack, we can't because in-house isn't gathering data. And that's been another interesting thing for us is as we've sort of talked to the deans and stuff about a few different things. They said, well, we got to gather outcomes, and us, well, but you guys aren't gathering outcomes. So like, how do you want to approach this? So that there have been some interesting conversations around that. So we're very curious to see. We're waiting to get some sort of student level data right now from the fall to be able to then map onto how students did in the classes, right? See what you've got, and be able to assess. Like those, we started with a 3-year sort of contract, and so I think there are certain pieces that very clearly, right, are benefits, right? Taking you out of the administrative burden, taking you out of having to hire, having to figure all that out. At the same time, at the bottom line, right, for any university, if you're going to add this, right, you can make the tutoring free for students, which I'm a huge supporter of, but I don't think Knack is in the business of making it free to the university, right? So you have to make your sort of decision, right? Is the cost benefit there? A piece of that benefit is the success of the students, and then a piece of it is the cost of the administration, right? And that's something that everybody's got to analyze for themselves. But so far so good for us, and we're really looking forward to getting some data and being able to sort of dig in and see where we are.
Yeah, and I'll comment on the last topic that you just brought up, as Anne-Marie did, the cost of it to the institution, because again, it's free to the students. We don't want to ever charge students for being tutored. But yeah, I mean, paying, you have to find the money. So I'm wondering if any of you have ideas or suggestions regarding, could you add it into student fees? Could you add the costs, or could you cobble together from different departments? Any suggestions or reflections on how you've paid for Knack in the past, how you may pay for it in the future?
I'll share just from our perspective real quickly. I don't know where everybody else is, right? In terms of well, I know that Georgia and Iowa. Okay, so everybody's in a different climate right now, particularly if you're a public. We are definitely not in an area where our board is looking at increasing fees. So that's going to be a non-starter for us. But for us, it was just we need this. We don't have it. We certainly can't start it next year, right? And let's do this, right? Let's try it out. And so we carved out some of our existing student support money and redirected it, right, toward this, with the idea that we're going to evaluate and see how it goes. And if the data support the benefit, then we will continue to sort of put that money there, right? And I think that's just a piece that you've got to be able to make the decision on.
Yeah,
we
definitely.
did our initial funding through a strategic plan jumpstart initiative that our president had allocated a few $1 million for a variety of things as we moved into our new strategic plan a couple of years ago. So that's been a piece of it. But I think Keith is on point. I mean, we are not going to be able to raise our fees to provide this for our students. That's really a non-starter. So we need to find other ways of either reallocating existing dollars, finding some efficiencies in some of our other programs that we're providing to students. How does this become the Knack become a component of the other offerings that we have? And quite honestly, working with our foundation, with some of our donors who would be interested in supporting something like this in the spirit of student success, across the institution. I think that's another area that we've got some opportunity to develop some funding resources from.
And for us, just continuing to remind people that a lot of the funding for this is going back to your own students, through hiring, in our model where we're only employing our students to be the tutors. This is an opportunity for, this money goes back into, not all of it, but a big chunk of it goes back into the pockets of our own students. And so it's a high impact practice in terms of student employment on campus. And don't forget the benefits to the people that are the tutors. There's a ton of academic benefits to those students in addition to the ones that are being served by the tutoring itself.
Thank you, all three of you. Thank you very much. And we are closing in on time. I want to give a quick overview of Knack. This is going to be, I'm hoping, a 1-minute overview. We help institutions eliminate barriers to academic support. You've been hearing that here today. Barriers like access, awareness, time, or even stigma. Our goals are simple, but we think pretty powerful. We drive student engagement with academic services. Our goal is to build a greater sense of belonging through peer connection, close equity gaps, and make peer learning accessible for every student. And we do that by onboarding your high-achieving students as independent contractors. So you can think of it as a peer-to-peer network model like Uber, as Stephen said earlier, but for tutoring. That structure allows us to help campuses reach more students and more courses, especially the ones that often get overlooked. And just as important, it's a way to reinvest in your students by paying them for their expertise. So we don't have a lot of time for questions at the end. I'm trying to look and see. It looks like all of the questions hopefully have been answered. Any of you have any final remarks before we get going?
I'll just note that I dropped a little link. We had an article that ran where they interviewed some of the students and faculty and stuff. So if anybody's interested, there's a little summary of how it went for us in the fall there.
I think I just reposted that on LinkedIn this morning, the same article. Take a look. Great. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. I'd like to thank Steve from URU for creating space for this conversation, and also to Stephen and Keith and Anne-Marie for sharing your insights and expertise. We're really encouraged by the momentum around P3s and peer support, and we're excited about what's possible when campuses and partners work together. Steve?
Thank you, Paige, and thanks to Steve and Anne-Marie and Heath also for taking time to reprise what was a terrific in-person conversation at our national conference in January, to do this for the benefit of a much larger audience. And as I said, we'll post the recording as soon as we can, let everyone know that it's available. Thanks again to all of you who joined us today and for your questions. And we'll look forward to further conversations about this topic in the future. Everyone have a great day. Thank you so much.